Ghost towns, bombed houses. The airport of Sukhumi hasn't been rebuilt since the civil war in the 90s. It has hardly any jobs. 20 years old Davidas Miknius from Lithuania can imagine how the current life of the 250,000 Abkhazians in the Caucasus looks like. His grandfather lived there with his new wife until he died 2 months ago. Davidas explains, Abkhazians and Georgians live a peaceful life as neighbors. For day-to-day problems, they find solutions. Therefore, they even reopened the border to Georgia.
My grandfather, when he was sick, Abkhazia wasn't available to help him, and he traveled to Georgia.
That isn't always possible. Usually, the Abkhazian border to Georgia is closed, controlled by Russia. For medical treatments, people can cross the line sometimes, an offer from Georgia to reconnect with its former region. When it comes to politics, Abkhazians and Georgians are not on the same page. Georgians still want the reintegration of Abkhazia in its own territorial ground. Abkhazia finally wants to be seen as an independent state at all costs. Only a handful of states worldwide recognize Abkhazia as independent, including Russia.
It's very sad for me. I know how people living there, they want independence and so on. But I think it can be also a problem when the Abkhazia will get independence and Russians will impact there. So I'm afraid maybe it can be like in Ukraine.
Davidas' concern has reasons. Abkhazia's direct neighbor Russia not only controls the border, they also support the region financially, for example by paying pensions. Russia even handed out Russian passports to Abkhazians. What are the interests of Russia behind all this? German journalist Rainer Kaufmann, who has been traveling and working in Georgia for over 40 years, has an answer.
The main background is Georgia wants to become a full member of NATO, and it will never ever happen if it has regional conflicts. Russia has now the tool to say no to Georgian integration into NATO, and that's the problem. You cannot, as Georgia, you cannot have two goals: full membership of NATO and reconstruction of your territorial integrity. That's the reality today.
To become part of Russia is no option for the Abkhazians. At the same time, they don't want to lose Russian support. The involvement of Russia has made this conflict more complicated. Is there any hope of a positive change?
I know that in Abkhazia, a part of the political elite has very good connections and links to Georgia. There are some lines to speak. And that's why I say Georgians cannot say every day occupation. That's no solution. They have to speak with the Abkhazians and with the Ossetians.
Open borders, rebuilding the railway, trade. These are only few examples about how Abkhazians and Georgians can reconnect with each other, at least on a daily basis, like the medical treatments of Davidas' grandfather. Marion Kipiani has been part of 2 humanitarian peace-building projects involved in the conflict. She's certain it's too difficult to find one solution accepted by everybody.
The most important steps to be taken at this point are practical steps. So if there can be small improvements made for questions that are of concern to both sides, for example, about healthcare issues, about now with COVID, possibly about the question of disease transmission, but also economic questions like livelihood of people in regions along the administrative boundary lines that are economically very much impacted by the fact of the closure of the borders and of the restrictions in transit.
In her opinion, these actions would definitely need more help from the outside, for example from the European Union.
Now I think we would need more involvement also from international actors, maybe to support steps that can help this sort of like engagement on practical issues, and to just keep it part of the dialogue with all sides and to keep financial support up for it so that there is some kind of positive incentive also going forward with some of these measures.
In March 2020, the Abkhazians elected a new president from the side of the opposition. As expected, the election wasn't accepted by Tbilisi in Georgia. Davidas and his family have high hopes that the new president will lead the country into better times. They believe through trade and tourism, Abkhazia can survive economically.
The Abkhazia is rebuilding a little step by step, but locals believe that tourists will help them rebuild all the situation, all the buildings.
That is only one perspective. There are still Abkhazians who agree to a reintegration with Georgia, including federal elements, of course. No matter how a solution will look like, the geographic location will remain the same. Abkhazians and Georgians will be somehow involved with each other, either as neighbors or as parts. That's why humanitarian and financial help from international institutions is so important to keep up the peaceful life which we see now, and to make it possible for Davidas to visit his family as soon as possible.